So, in my multi year journey around being a Black American, not living in proximity to whiteness, my recent journey in learning Tutnese, which is a Black American language, there are two things that I've thought about in regard to Black American culture and proceeding forward. One, I'm kind of looking at the comparison of Black American culture to other cultures and, why it's not respected because I've been in the, Black American culture is a viable culture. Just trying to solidify that in my mind and in my life. Two things that I think of is that Black American culture should be practiced. There are already practices that exist that need to be uplifted, and then I think we need to just create more practices around Black American culture, which I think solidifies the depthness of it. But also for me personally, this isn't really a call to action or thought around everyone, but like for the future of Black American culture, it being very aspirational because as you read more and as you learn more about patriarchal systems and what things used to be, even in relation to our ancestors, some of it is still not what we want. So, my thought is as we proceed forward, why can't we think of new things and create what we want, particularly in relation to, humans for other humans, be they male, female, non binary, all that type of stuff, like the interaction of people. Maybe patriarchy is in it, maybe matriarchy is in it. And I don't think of matriarchy as the opposite of patriarchy. I know it's not. Maybe create some new thing that is aspirational because in my not wanting to live in proximity to whiteness, I've also thought about, the idea. I went to a discussion group that I started going to on Mondays, and the discussion for this past Monday was, what do you think of independence? Like, what is your personal relationship with independence because of, the July 4th holiday? And you could answer it however you want, but for me, it was like independent thought of when we think of how our community behaves, I don't immediately think like other people where it's like, well, these people do this, so why don't we can do it too? I don't care what anybody else does. I hold my community to a higher standard than I would hold anybody, particularly because of the history of their behavior. Why would I hold them to a high standard of anything that they do? But also I had to explain to my group members that even me saying that I hold my community to a high standard is not under the lens of respectability politics. So I'm not thinking that there's anything wrong with Meg Thee Stallion or Rihanna. I'm not thinking that these people are like role models because they didn't sign up to be role models. Now, if you're a target for kids, like they brought up Kai Cenat, and I'm like, well, his target audience is children, so he should be more responsible because they talked about him lighting something up in a room. I'm like, if your target audience is actively children, then yes, you should be more responsible because they're like, oh, well, he can do whatever he want. That's the supremacy in like, I'm thinking of communal, the common good, how we are all interrelated with each other. I'm not on this individualism. Like, yes, you don't need to be codependent on anything. You can be interdependent, but I'm off this like we all individuals, we can do whatever. No, I'm not. That's not how I live my life. You can live your life like that, but that's not how I think of my community. That's not how I think of my journey. So I'm not on that. For me, it's not that they can get away with anything if that's not your target audience. Like if it's a Meg Thee Stallion, you can do whatever she want. Glorilla, they don't have to have clothes on for me. Like, they're adult women. And even though I'm not looking through a respectability politics lens, it doesn't mean that I think people could just do anything. Like, I still have the standard of, what can be right and wrong, but my right and wrong is not based on other people's lens of what they determine to be right or wrong. And I'm crafting that myself. I think we should bring back practices that we've had and like make it more solidified of like we practice being a Black American. Because yes, there's like multiple ways to be Black, but inside Black American culture, it is very distinct. Because some things that exist in the multiple ways to be Black is that you're participating in other people's culture or what other people do, which is fine. But if there is stuff that is in Black American culture that we created, I think there should be like a solidified like series of practices. I think that's what's different for other ethnicities and whatnot, is that they have practices, and then it should be aspirational. It doesn't all have to be based on the past. And that's not a severance of the connection with our ancestors. It's just that we are going to be somebody's ancestors. So we can create new things in the way that we want them to be created. And that can be the progress forward. And then somebody 100 years from now is like, my ancestor did this. I think something that dilutes Black American culture is how much we give it away or it's taken. And so that is another thing. It's like, the sand going through the fingers for our culture, is that because so much of Black American culture is infused into American culture, or is infused into how other people exist around the world, and then if you go a generation or several years, it is ingrained in their aspects of their culture, so they don't even comprehend where it came from anymore. And so because Black Americans know what we created, we can tell somebody in the UK, okay, that thing you're doing is because of us. It's our culture. But they don't even have that connection to it, which is kind of funny that the people are always talking about connection and how, Black Americans don't have connection and don't know where we come from and all this stuff. And it's like, y'all don't even have connection to 2 years ago that we created something. But I think that addressing the us giving it away, Ebonics, which I'm doing a revolutionary act and going back to calling it Ebonics because a Black man created the word Ebonics, the term African American Vernacular English, and we use that term to make it sound better than Ebonics because of the bad rap that Ebonics got. But if I go back to Ebonics, that's me being radical. Ebonics, even going back to the history of it from slavery, the point is to not be understood. So the fact that people judge it by their inability to understand, that means it's working. So y'all going on every social media platform to explain Ebonics to people. I watched a YouTube video that yesterday of a white man wanting to write a book on Ebonics and its complexities, which is commendable, but it's not to be explained. The people who understand it. That's the point of it. The origination of it was coming from, they refused to put African people who were from the same country or tribe at the same plantation, so they wouldn't be able to speak to each other. So we had to create this new language in which it was not formally taught. So it used the structures of the languages that they already knew. And then because they wanted to escape or just have fun or do something without the slave master knowing, the point was to not be understood. So for people to be constantly explaining what things mean is the antithesis to the purpose of the dialect. If we jump over to it being stolen, we get judged for the things that we do. The other people repackage it and present it in a different way to be elevated, and all of a sudden it's okay. So there's multiple ways in which you either know that it is from Black American culture and you're like handing it out like a pamphlet, or you're just taking it. Black American culture is the only culture in the world where everybody thinks they have a right to it. No matter if you're from the diaspora or you're from any other culture, people think they have a right to Black American culture. People don't realize that that is the way people interact with Black American culture as takers. That is a colonized state of mind. It doesn't matter if you're not of the race of the people who colonized, you still are operating under that state of mind of taking other people's culture because it's cool. And because it's packaged in music or dances, it's not that deep. So people telling us that we have no culture is because of their lack of information and not realizing how many aspects of American culture is because of Black people, and how many aspects of the culture you're participating in a whole different country is our culture. You're ignorant. And that's not to say Black American culture is everything, but there are very pointed things that people practice all over the world that is Black American culture. If you think of jazz, Miles Davis said, "The lazy ones do what we did." Go to an Asian country where they are excellent copiers. If you go to Europe, there are Europeans who are practicing jazz. Jazz is not something to be practiced. It's a feeling. Blues is not something to be practiced. It's a feeling. You can go on TikTok and see an Asian person, a European person perfectly do a lick that some Black person did that they forgot about. Because that was the point, to do it the one time. Black American culture is so transformational and innovative. Like, that's another thing. As soon as we create something and it's stolen, we create something new, which is why it's the sand in the fingers. That's why we can't get our footing in Black American culture, because we're always having to create something new because we're always having it stolen. So those are my thoughts.